Today we're at the Sunnyvale Heritage Park Museum. They just closed, but let's see if Laura, the director, is still around.
And welcome, come right in.
Thanks for letting us come in and sit at this gorgeous table. I feel really nervous because it's like everything, not only is it irreplaceable and expensive, but it's also tied. So if you knock one over, then hopefully I won't knock anything over. I'll just keep quiet hands and talk about the Murphy family. What can you tell us?
Well, the Murphys, they immigrated to California. They came for religious and education freedom. They also came with money. They were not part of the poor and starving. This is way before the potato famine. So they had money to purchase land when they first immigrated to Canada, and then to Missouri, and then to California. They purchased 5,000 acres upon arrival here in Sunnyvale from Castro. And so yes, they had very nice things. They had silver, they had handmade lace tablecloths, they had the piano, they had very nice
yeah, look at that massive piano that had to be shipped all the way from the East Coast, had to go down the Horn and then around and up the entire continent to be brought to Sunnyvale. Tell us about what happened with the house. This is pretty historic because they had to ship it pre-built. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, yes. Murphy family wanted a wood frame house because that's what they were used to and had in the other parts of the America. So when they ordered their house literally from the East Coast in Maine, put together in leather straps and wooden pegs after it came around the Horn, here in what is now Murphy Park section of Sunnyvale. It was made a state historical landmark when the Murphy family turned it over to the city of Sunnyvale in the late 1950s. On it, the Historical Society was in the process of getting it made a state historical park when unfortunately the powers that be decided Central Expressway was far more important than saving a historical house. And so the house was bulldozed very early on a Sunday morning in 1961, and Central Expressway now takes its place.
Well, I do use Central Expressway, but I am sorry that the Murphy house is no longer there. Tell us about how it came to be reproduced on this site.
Yes, I was asked to do a feasibility study if now was the right time to build a museum for Sunnyvale back in 2001. And we did, and we looked at several places. We looked at an old house that was on North Sunnyvale Avenue. We looked at rebuilding the Murphy house on Murphy Park, but of course that land is much smaller now because of the expressway. And then the city also asked us to look at building it here. And of course money is a little easier to raise if you are rehabbing an old house as opposed to building new. And so with the city giving us the land to build on here and with the infrastructure of the parking lot and all of that in place, we went, and then we could also do it much larger on this site.
Is there any part of the original building that survives in this building?
Only little tiny small things. I think there was a downspout that someone saved from the house. Quite a few people saved a balustrade from the original porch, but of course that's not ADA accessible now. We're compliant, so we had them rebuilt. You know, everything's a little bit larger. We say the Murphy house in steroids. It's bigger, wider, taller than what the original house was. But a tremendous amount of the details that we copied from old photographs as far as picture rails were concerned, and arches and pocket doors.
That sounds good. Tell us about the Murphy family. When they came here, they had to take a pretty long, long walk to get here. What did they do when they finally got here?
Murphy was very much a rancher, a farmer and a rancher on it, and raised a tremendous amount of cattle. And so that's what he started here in Sunnyvale, was mainly all wheat fields. And then he also got into a lot of cattle and a lot of horses. And a tremendous amount of their goods was sold when the gold rush came, and all the supplies that they needed. And he continued to buy land and expand his holdings. At one time, Martin Murphy could get on his horse here in Sunnyvale and ride all the way to Santa Maria without leaving Murphy land. That's a successful farmer. And of course, they came for religious and education freedom. So all of his smarts of becoming this tremendous entrepreneur and making this huge holdings for the family was all done on his gut reaction of being a businessman. All of his papers are either signed by an ex or signed by one of his sons.
That's amazing, and yet he was able to accomplish so much and acquire so much just from the sheer gumption. And that really resonates with the history of Sunnyvale. Well, I would say recent history of Sunnyvale, because the kind of entrepreneurship that you see in Sunnyvale, which is in fact the geological center of Silicon Valley, the way that he left everything he knew, just decided to strike out on his own. He went to Canada and bought land, made a profit, went to Missouri, bought land, made a profit, and then when he came here, again, buying land, making more profit. That sounds so modern, but it's also quite a historic achievement, because he only left because he was a Catholic, and at the time, you just were not allowed to pretty much not have any rights. You couldn't go to school, you couldn't run for public office. If you were a Catholic, you would have to change your religion or take the leave and take the welcome mat with you somewhere else.
He said his children could not be educated in Ireland, so he came here. But he did put his money where his mouth was. When he said he came for religious and education freedom, one of the first things he did was donate money and land to start the first higher education, which you now today know as Santa Clara University.
That's right.
And it was only a year later when he wanted his daughters educated as well as his sons, and started what we now call Sisters of Notre Dame. At that time it was started in Santa Clara. It is now up in Belmont, but the school was in Santa Clara. In fact, we have one of the report cards from one of his daughters.
That's so cool. Tell us about what happened to the Murphys.
Well, the Murphys, Martin Murphy, lived until I was early 1890s on it, and then later when his wife died a few years later, the land was subdivided. It was equally inherited by his children on it, and some of the children sold their land immediately. Some of them tried to hold on to it. But his children were really not ranchers and farmers. His children, they had the good education. They became state senators. They became state House of Representatives. One was mayor of San Jose for 4 terms. And so they were very much business people. But then along came the financial crisis, mid 1890s, and they sadly lost a lot of their holdings, as well as many, many other people in the area at that time. And some that they held on to certain portions of it, but not the huge acreage that they once had.
The Murphys may be gone, but their name lives on, because a lot of street names and a lot of place names in Sunnyvale are named after various members of the family. Can you tell us a few of those names?
Yes, I would say Maud, Matilda, Mary, Evelyn, Elizabeth, all Martin Murphy daughters.
That's right.
Say Bernard. We don't have a Patrick. I'm trying to think of the other sons' names. Then there's Arquez, Polk, Tafe. All of those are son-in-laws.
Sons-in-law,
so his grandchildren's names on it. Maud and Matilda were twin granddaughters. On it, and so they those named after them as well. And then, of course, what was Main Street is now what we call changed to Murphy Street,
Okay.
honoring him.
All right. Well, thank you for letting us know all these facts about the various members of the Murphy family. Let's take a look around. Can you show us some of the things that they left behind and donated to the library, or to the museum?
Yes, some of these items that we have from the original Murphy House here were purchased either by the city or were purchased by members of the Historical Society just before they bulldozed the original house. Such as the piano was stored in the basement of a city building on its side with the legs removed. Had been there so long the city forgot they owned it, but we had records that it was still there. The city had built metal shelving in front of it, so no one saw it, no one knew it was there.
Okay.
But we got it all back. But then also I started this project when we were raising the money to build it. We did a huge concerted effort to find as many Murphy descendants as possible. And it's when they came to the groundbreaking and when they came to the dedication of it and the grand opening, they said, I inherited this. It belongs in the museum. We are now on the 4th great grandchildren, and so the story gets harder to tell and gets a little bit more diluted each generation. And so the tablecloth came literally the week that we opened the museum. And this great-granddaughter had inherited, and she says, I never take it out because I'm too afraid of damaging it. It belongs in the museum. And so a lot of things have come to us since then and still continue to.
That's great. Well, let's go around the museum and see some of these great things that the various Murphys have given to you.
Okay.
All right.
This is the introduction room in the museum. It sort of introduces you to the entire Murphy story. Martin Murphy Jr. and his family were part of the first successful wagon train to cross the Sierras.
Wow.
2 years before the unsuccessful Donners.
There they are.
And Murphys not only did not lose a single person, they had 2 babies born in the trek that lived. But the Murphys had emigrated from Canada, from Ireland to Canada, Canada to Missouri, and then following a malaria plague, they left Missouri after the death of a couple of Murphy family members and started on the trek across to the west and to the Sierras. It said they were successful. They not only had everybody at the end of it, but they also had 2 babies born. One of the babies, of course, became quite well known because of her name. Elizabeth Murphy was born on the trek, but she fell out of the sling that she was attached to in the horse and into the Yuba River. And her father said that was her first baptism, so her name was Elizabeth Yuba Murphy. And there's a portrait of her in the next room.
That's great. Thank you.
And we have other period rooms here, and this is the kitchen. This dates to the very same time as what the Murphy family was, and with many of the little tiny things, even down to a glass cruet that came from the original Murphy house. The stove in this room came from the Joshua Hendy house, and of course Hendy Ironworks arrived here in 1906 after the 1906 earthquake, and so that actually came from the Hendy house. And the pie safes, of course, and an ice box, all of those came the same amount of time. The Murphy house was, by the way, one of the first ones to be electrified, but that wasn't until the 1930s. It never did have heating. The entire time the house was here, it was only strictly fireplaces.
Okay. This looks really good. Like all the various implements, they don't look that inviting. They look vaguely unfriendly. I'm glad we have kind of like nicer looking plastic instruments, but a lot of this stuff, it just looks almost medieval.
Yes,
like how easy was it to do the cooking in here?
Well, everything works. I mean, it was hot because you did have to have the wood stove going the entire time as far as baking and everything is concerned. All of the utensils, and a tremendous amount of them are handmade, hand designed. They worked, they were functionable. They certainly didn't have nice ergonomic handles or anything, of course, that we have today. And then the next room in the museum is also a very special one, and that is the Murphy bedroom.
Okay.
And we always refer to it as the bishop's bedroom because we said Mr. Murphy was very religious, and he came for religious and education freedom. And one of the things that he did was offer a room in his house that was always available to Bishop Elamani when he rode his horse from the mission in Monterey up to San Francisco. And this is the original Murphy home bedstead.
Okay.
From that room.
That sounds great. Hey, there's a pie in there.
Yes, there is. One of our creative volunteers, who is also an artist, custom made us a pie.
Oh my gosh. Look at this delicious pie.
Made of plaster of Paris.
Yum, yum. Plaster of Paris. You know who else likes plaster of Paris pies? Bears. A local diner sent some mascots for a photo op, and of course they went straight for the pies.
Well, we have a tremendous amount of the tools of the day, cookbooks of the day, a little bit different than what we use.
Cool. Let's go to the next room.
We're now in the Mural Room. This is our version of a timeline, where instead of doing it in words, the entire thing is done in photo by a special artist who does museum murals. We start out with the Ohlone Indian. And
yeah, there they are.
In the, pretty much all of Sunnyvale, but certainly up near the bay and into the marsh areas. And go on to where the first mission in Santa Clara University, and starting with Martin Murphy arriving with
there
his
they are.
Wagon.
There's Mr. Murphy.
He planted all of his wheat fields here in the Sunnyvale area.
And there he is plowing.
And the large oak trees that were very, very plentiful around here, the oak and willow trees. Then the railroad, Martin Murphy donated the land for the first railroad from San Jose to San Francisco with 2 stops on his property, which you now call downtown Sunnyvale, as well as Lawrence Station was also part of his property. And then the early downtown that started right about the turn of the century. And this is the car of Washington and Murphy. All 4 of those buildings still stand today, by the way.
Yeah, around here. I think these windows eventually came out because a couple of years ago, I saw them doing a little bit of renovation. I thought, hey, what are they doing with those windows?
Yeah, they're now a flat one.
Yeah.
And then the corner here is 1906. The first large-scale industries, and they both arrived in 1906 because after Martin Murphy's land is sold, the developer wanted to start a town here, and he offered free land to any of the large corporations or companies that would resettle here in Sunnyvale to help build his town. And of course, he made his money by all the employees that came along with it, and the housing and the land and the gardens.
Okay, so got a bit of a sweetheart deal on that one.
Yes, definitely. And then, of course, the valley, when it was orchards for as far as you could see. Special trains came from San Francisco, came from San Jose, just to see the spectacular sight. And it was that way for many, many years.
The Valley of Heart's Delight.
And people still think very fondly of those words and wish we still had it.
Yeah.
And then we ended here in the 1930s with the arrival of Moffett, and the
flying airplanes.
The sparrows that the airplanes that actually hooked underneath the bottom of the this has been 1930s, and then our mural ends in the 1950s with the arrival of Lockheed. And we start bulldozing all of the orchard fields and putting into the large housing developments. And from then on, we became more of a high-tech industry than what we did the orchards. But Sunnyvale was famous worldwide for all of its fruit crops around here, and then less than 50 years later, we became worldwide as Sunnyvale.
Well, great. Thank you so much for showing us around. This looks really fabulous. Can you tell us a little bit about the museum itself, the hours, and what services you have available?
Yes, the museum is run by the Sunnyvale Historical Society. We are an all-volunteer nonprofit organization. We are open every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday from 12 noon to 4 p.m. And it's our goal to always be open free of charge. And then we also run a very well-known school program for all third graders, because that's the age level that they learn local history. And we do a couple thousand school program here for a couple thousand third graders each year too. And we do those on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.
Okay.
So the museum is closed to the adults.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. If you'd like to visit the Sunnyvale Heritage Park Museum, it's located in the Community Center at 570 East Remington Park. The museum is surrounded by the Orchard Heritage Park. The City of Sunnyvale and the Historical Society preserved some 10 acres of Sunnyvale's world-famous Blenheim apricots. Every summer, these delicious apricots are harvested and sold on site. In 2001, the park opened an orchard interpreted exhibit of displays featuring the lives of orchard workers and the cultivating and canning of fruit. In addition to the rooms shown on this show, the museum has a permanent exhibit space for collections of artifacts and smaller galleries for rotating exhibits. The permanent exhibit includes historic objects from the earliest settlers to the space and aeronautics industry. Check out this example of Silicon Valley entrepreneurism. Back then, the cutting-edge technology meant a safer chicken incubator. For more recent technology, the museum has a computer timeline wall upstairs in the events room. Space is available for rentals hosting up to 100 guests. This is where the museum hosts two very popular Victorian teas, one in the spring and one in the winter. Every year, they have an antique fair and a garage sale to raise funds. If you'd like to help keep history alive, you are most welcome to sign up with the Sunnyvale Historical Society and Museum Association. The museum and all of its events are 100% volunteer run. Thanks for joining us on yet another history tour of Sunnyvale. We are going to be here next month at the State of the City, and that will be on July the 29th on Saturday. So make sure you leave some space on your calendar for that, and hopefully we'll see you there in person. Bye for now.